Right, we're joined now by Igor Khrestin, a visiting fellow for the National Security Institute. Igor, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let's start with what we heard about Taiwan there. Of course, Xi Jinping issuing that warning, and then it seemed that the two seemed to come to a sense of cooperation towards the end. What do you make of how they handled the discussions around Taiwan and what we're going to see from here?
Well, I think that there were two different fundamental goals here with regards to Taiwan. For Xi Jinping, this is a primary issue in U.S.-China relations. It is a primary goal of his presidency is to reunify what he calls the Chinese nation, and Taiwan is an essential part of that. This is something that he has spoken about repeatedly, something he's spoken about on this visit. For President Trump and this administration, it is a sensitive issue, but not a primary one. They wanted to focus on trade and just overall strategic stability to bring sort of a sense of calm to U.S.-China relations. I think there were a few moments there that President Trump spoke about President Xi's desire to reunify and said, I'm holding my cards close to my chest. Secretary Rubio followed up with a remark that the U.S. policy remains the same, which is that the U.S. would oppose any reunification, quote unquote, through force. But I think those differences remain, and there remains a fundamental issue of contention. And I think here, nothing really was achieved of substance other than the two sides expressed their respective positions and pretty much left it at that.
Well, Igor, that brings me to the next question. If you believe really nothing was accomplished, nothing of substance, what was the purpose of this summit? Anything accomplished at all?
Some things were accomplished. Both President Xi and President Trump believe in presidential diplomacy as a cornerstone of this relationship. And historically, that's been the fact, starting with President Nixon's visit to China in 1972, that set the pathway for eventual normalization of U.S.-China relations in 1979. Presidential visits have been the cornerstone of that. This is no exception. The last time a U.S. president visited China was in 2017, and that was President Donald Trump. So there's great importance to these visits as, again, a stabilizing factor. And I think this was the administration's goal. Certainly for Xi Jinping, predictability in U.S.-China relations is a primary goal. This is something that next week, President Xi will host President Vladimir Putin. So it tells you that China's goals are to have as many sort of, as many hands in the global pot, so to speak, as possible. So from this perspective, it was a productive visit for what I think considered to be both sides. I think the shortcoming for this administration was that they would have liked to see more commercial commitments from China. I think this is something where they've fallen a bit short on what they would see. But I think for a stabilizing factor, this was a positive visit.
Well, that's a good thing.
Okay.
President Trump, of course, has invited China's President Xi to the White House in September to continue their partnership. So where do we go from here? You mentioned them wanting more commercial partnerships that we didn't exactly see come out of this meeting. Do you think we could see that in the future?
It's possible. I think this depends on a variety of factors, including this administration, President Trump's desire to use tariffs as a factor to change the perceived imbalance in U.S.-China commercial relationship, which tended to favor China quite heavily for a long period of time. And this is something that the Chinese side has been very unhappy about. It also depends on Chinese behavior on a variety of factors. I mean, the basis for the U.S.-China relationships changed dramatically over the last 30 years because China is a rising power, or views itself as a rising power that seeks to supplant U.S. global primacy. I think, for the lack of a better expression, the United States, rightly so, wants to maintain its leadership in a variety of sectors, economic, technological, and so forth. That will cause tensions automatically in security sphere as well. So it'll depend. I think it's a long time to go until September. Of course, one of the issues here that wasn't also very much resolved was the conflict with Iran, which is important for China for both strategic and economic reasons. 80% of Iran's seaborne oil exports go to China. And so this is something that hasn't been resolved. So time will tell, I think, is the best way to answer that.
All right, we'll hope for more substantial progress in September. Igor Khrestin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.